Let's resume our review session with George Washington. Do you know who he was?
It would be a shame for a U.S. citizen to not know the first president who was also regarded as the father of our country.
On that note, let's move on to the American history section. What is one reason colonists from Europe came to America?
Freedom was the biggest reason. But they also came here for political liberty, religious freedom, and economic opportunity.
Who lived in America before the Europeans arrived?
The Native Americans, also called American Indians, were here long before the European colonists arrived. There were more than 600 tribes. A few major ones are Cherokee, Navajo, Sioux, and Apache.
What group of people was taken to America and sold as slaves?
The short answer is Africans. The longer answer is that the Europeans went to Africa to trade their manufactured goods for slaves. Then they brought the slaves to America to trade them for tobacco, cotton, and sugar, which they took back to Europe to complete the trade route.
Why did the colonists fight the British?
The biggest reason was because of the high taxes, and they didn't have self-government. But I think it was mainly because the British Army stayed in their houses for too long.
Sounds like my relatives.
You're not going to start a war with them, are you?
Nah, I just stopped cooking and they'll leave.
I've had your food. I don't blame them for prolonging their stay so they can eat more of your yummy food.
Right. Anyway, do you know who wrote the Declaration of Independence?
Thomas Jefferson wrote that, and it was adopted on July 4th, 1776.
What happened at the Constitutional Convention?
In 1787, the Constitution was written at the Constitutional Convention.
The Federalist Papers supported the passage of the U.S. Constitution. Name one of the writers.
The Federalist is a collection of 85 articles and essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay under the pseudonym Publius to promote the ratification of the United States Constitution.
What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for?
Wow, I can't just list one. That famous U.S. diplomat started the first free libraries. He was the first Postmaster General of the U.S. He also wrote and published the famous Poor Richard's Almanac for more than 20 years.
I love that man. He did so much for this country. And of course you know that is his face on our currently largest bill, the $100 bill. That's a pretty big honor for someone who is not a president. Anyway, let's move on to the 1800s. What territory did the U.S. buy from France in 1803?
This was one of my favorite parts of U.S. history. The short answer is Louisiana, but the long answer is very interesting. The U.S. originally wanted to buy just the city of New Orleans and its ports from French Emperor Napoleon, because about 37% of the U.S. exports went out through here. At the time, Napoleon was thinking about invading England, so he needed money to fund this plan. The third U.S. president, Thomas Jefferson, sent James Monroe and Robert Livingston to France to negotiate the purchase. They were authorized to pay up to $10 million for New Orleans. They were absolutely shocked when Napoleon offered to sell the entire territory to the U.S. for $15 million. This was, of course, back in the day of no phones, so they could not check with President Jefferson. They thought that the offer was too good to pass, and also feared that Napoleon could withdraw the offer at any time. So they signed the offer and doubled the size of the U.S. at the time.
That's fascinating. So did Napoleon get enough money to fund his war with England?
Well, he did get enough money, but that war never did happen.
I wonder why. That guy fought anybody, anytime. How about the U.S.? I bet we fought a few wars in the 1800s. Can you name one war?
There were 4 wars in that century. The War of 1812 with the British from 1812 to 1815. The Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. The Civil War from 1861 to 1865, and the Spanish-American War in 1898. The Civil War was fought between the North and the South because of the disagreement on slavery, states' rights, and economic reasons. About 700,000 Americans died in this war, more than all other U.S. wars combined.
Wow, that was a lot of people, especially in the period with no weapons of mass destruction. Okay, let's move on to a couple of important people in our history. What was one important thing that Abraham Lincoln did?
Our 16th president did a lot of good things, but he was probably best known for leading the U.S. during the Civil War and issuing the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves in the Confederate States.
Another great man was Martin Luther King Jr. Do you remember what he did?
He fought for civil rights, which is the movement that tried to end racial discrimination and worked for equality for all Americans.
How about a famous woman? What did Susan B. Anthony do?
That remarkable woman also fought for civil rights, but she was best known for her fight for women's rights.
I guess we moved on to the 1900s now with Martin Luther King Jr. Can you name one war fought by the U.S. in that century?
Well, we started with World War I from 1914 to 1918. Then we had World War II from 1939 to 1945. The Korean War was from 1950 to 1953. The Vietnam War was from 1955 to 1975. The last one was the Persian Gulf War from 1990 to 1991.
Who were our presidents during World War I and World War II?
Woodrow Wilson was our president during World War I, and Franklin Roosevelt was our president during World War II.
Who did the U.S. fight in World War II?
Most people remember Germany because of Hitler and Japan for the atomic bombs, but the U.S. also fought Italy in World War II.
There was a general in World War II who then later became president. Do you remember who that was?
That would be General and then President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
During the Cold War, what was the main concern of the U.S.?
Communism was the main concern. It probably still is.
Okay. The last American history question is this. What major event happened in the U.S. on September 11th, 2001?
The answer is just these 5 words. Terrorists attacked the United States. Of course, both you and I know that it's much more than that. It affected not only the U.S., but also many other countries. The whole world changed from that day.
When you go to your interview, the interviewer will randomly choose 10 questions from a list of 100 questions. You will need to get at least 6 correct answers to pass that part of the interview. They will also test you on your English skills. You will need to correctly read aloud 1 out of 3 sentences. The sentences will use words in this list here. You will also need to correctly write out 1 of 3 sentences. The sentences will use words in this list here. In the lesson, some questions ask for 1 or 2 things, but Andy gave a lot more because he's a history buff. For your answers, you only need to give the right number of items that the interviewer asks for. If you are learning English as a second language, restart or pause the video as often as you need to practice your pronunciation. That's it for today. Please come back next Saturday to continue to Part 3 of the U.S. Citizenship Test questions. If you have any questions or ideas for future lessons, please comment down below.